Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here at this afternoon session in the industry track. Today, we're going to be talking about data science and machine learning challenges and opportunities across the industry. With me today, I have John, Robert, and Alicia, and hopefully Anna will join us just in a short while. She's having her presentation, so you know how that is. A lot of questions, a lot of stress. So she'll join us shortly. I'm going to hand over the word now to the participants in the panel to introduce themselves. I'm sure they'll make a much better job with that than I can do myself. John, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. My name's John, and I'm the chief architect at Paradox Interactive. So my role involves kind of keeping a wide breadth of all the different technologies that can help us build better games and improve our processes. And I'm very excited to be here because I also did a PhD in applied mathematics kind of 15 years ago, looking at neural networks and genetic algorithms. And it's super cool to see them flourishing now. So,
great.
Awesome.
Pass the word over to Robert then.
Thank you. My name is Robert Luciani, and I am CTO at Foxrane, a company that focuses on using AI to solve operations research problems. So right at the bridge of mathematics and AI. It's going to be fun to talk to you guys about applying AI to industrial problems.
Nice. And then we have Alicia.
Hi, my name is Alicia Montoya. I work at the Swiss Re Institute, which is the R&D arm of Swiss Re, which is a leading reinsurer. And I think I'm going to be the voice of legacy industry. And I demand priority on the challenges of instituting enterprise scale machine learning into companies.
Well, somebody has to have that role as well. And Anna, thank you so much for joining us. Hope your presentation went well. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Anna Baecklund, and I'm the head of data science at ICA Sweden, which is the retail part of the ICA family. Then we also have a bank and a pharmacy and some other companies. And I also think that I'm a very good, person speaking about legacy systems. So we can be two in that club.
I'm looking forward. I see two sides in this discussion, so let's see where we end up. Why don't we delve directly into the questions here today? Maturity check. What is the current state of data science and machine learning implementation across the different industries here? So, Alicia, you wanted to take a stand on legacy industry. Why don't you go ahead and tell us where you are?
Okay, so there are good news. So I would pool machine learning applications in insurance generally into two buckets. One is automation, and that's really all from accessing data to processing policies and automating things like claims processes. The other bucket is risk modeling, and that's where we can do better. Also in automation, I guess we can do better both. So if we look at how we're using machine learning today, generalized linear models are pretty much standard, and we use them for risk assessments and prediction for things like hurricanes, earthquakes, floods. And these work really well as long as risks follow a kind of constant progression and that we have past data. However, these only offer fragmented and narrowly focused productivity improvements. And so really to reap enterprise scale transformative benefits, we need a bigger investment in data engineering. And that is something that we are still in our infancy. And so by carefully sourcing, curating, and integrating data sets, we can really deliver huge benefits like faster claim settlements, cross-selling across product lines, and better risk scoring, which is at the heart of what we are now really developing and positioning strongly on. But accessing relevant and high quality data in a timely manner remains a challenge. And so we are doing things like reinforcement learning and ensemble modeling approaches that help us get better understanding of, for example, overlaying physical models onto machine learning approaches so as to understand risks better in real time. But of course, that can only really reap benefits if we can get the full picture working. And the other thing that's pretty exciting is privacy preserving analytics and federated learning, which are approaches that are helping us introduce, on the one hand, trust, so that we can all do analytics on shared data sets and while preserving data privacy. And the other thing is things like federated learning for things like edge computing, where we can start pushing the compute onto the edge devices that can also help us do more analytics without having to access all the data.
Alicia, it doesn't sound you're too far behind. It sounds like you're representing a legacy industry. It sounds like you have a very good vision of the future, at least. Anna, ICA, you're making a big push for these topics as well. Would you like to give us where you are today and your industry?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that, if you look at the whole retail industry, we have come pretty far in certain fields, such as marketing, right? The customer experience. And I know that it's the same as at H&M. You have also reached pretty far to give this kind of, personalized overall customer experience and so on. Other parts that retail as a field is pretty far ahead in is logistics, right? And also automation. But then again, we have the legacy systems, and the analytical departments are not big enough. Or, rather, there is not enough people thinking in the analytical terms, if you know what I mean. And then again, we have e-commerce, also a growing field. And if we were to talk ICA, I would say that we have an absolutely brilliant robotics team who's implementing a lot of automation. And, I'm still a bit disappointed because they described this to me as the robotics team, and I really envisioned small robots going around in, our in the warehouses lifting things. But no, it's automation, which is still very important, and they are doing a great job. And then we are doing a lot of optimization work, once again, when it comes to logistics, but also looking into health projects, because ICA as a company has a lot of data about, what customers prefer when it comes to food, right? And then we can look into healthy living together with different research groups. But yeah, that's a short summary.
I'm sure we could go on forever and ever and talk about our own industries. But Robert, coming from a product perspective, you got some cutting edge things going on in there. What would you say is the status of your industry?
I think operations research applies to very many industries, and some of the industries are very visceral in how they how operations research can improve operating margins and that kind of thing. But it's very seldom that operations research algorithms are developed from within those industries. So typically it happens that they're developed at universities, and not even for the intent of operations research. You'll have some mathematicians trying to figure out how to color a graph or something. And then you'll have some programmer in the middle that's trying to solve a problem that they've been given by a business person, and they say, well, we know that there's a best practice for coloring graphs. I'm going to use that algorithm. And so, in these industries where they're trying to optimize logistics, or they're trying to optimize pricing, or they're trying to do bin packing, cutting fabrics so that you're optimal, it's not like they're developing these algorithms from scratch. It's very safe and very good to use these well-established mathematical methods. So now that AI comes and says there is no best practice, it's up to you to reinvent this. Okay, are we going to expect the retailers and the banks and all these guys to upend this where they've been able to get reliable algorithms from mathematicians and sort of develop AI replacements for them in-house? It feels pretty unreasonable, but that's basically where we are. If you do that, you get a tremendous advantage because you're probably 5 to 10 years ahead of your competitors. So it depends a little bit on your company culture. Is that what we want to be spending 10% of our time on? That the kind of thing that can give us a leading edge? Or maybe it's not a part of your culture. I think it depends more on the culture than it does anything else right now. Like, how much do you believe in AI and your own capabilities, really?
Great. John, what do you say?
Super interesting hearing from all of you, because you can already spot some similarities and differences. But I think like the rest of you, there's a huge spread across the gaming industry of areas that we're more mature and areas that we're less mature. And I think some of the areas that we're definitely more mature in are around the kind of marketing and sales, where I see similarities with what some of the others are saying around here. But I also think it's like the peak of data science and machine learning in gaming is really around the kind of free to play and freemium games that are released. So these games kind of rely on giving the games out to free to a large number of customers, and then really understanding the player behavior and trying to be very precise about what moments in the game cause them to leave or maybe make a purchase, and then really kind of tweaking and honing every variable in the game to try to maximize the revenue and keep people in the game as long as possible. But then we kind of step down a little bit perhaps and move more into the traditional game developers who are building kind of story-focused games or experiences which are only meant to last for 30 or 40 hours. And it's a little bit harder to penetrate that area with data science and machine learning, because a lot of people have a vision of the game they want to build before they even start building it, tend to have kind of a dream of this product that you want to make. And you start moving more into entertainment than tech really there. And the area that really excites me, although is the least mature right now, is in the kind of novel uses of machine learning. And this is where we can maybe use the kind of modern speech synthesis to actually maybe replace some of the actors in our games. So instead of having to kind of record all that voice in a studio for many days at the time, sometimes we can perhaps just kind of replace the background characters maybe with voice models, which then produce the text on the fly. I don't think those actors are going to be replaced because they're still going to be needed to make the models. But it kind of moves the problem around to a different space where we have more control over it in the studio. So it's a really exciting time and a whole span of different answers to that question.
Yeah, I got to be honest with all of you. I'm having a hard time pinpointing because it sounds like it depends on where in the business you are, what focus area, the value associated. Some parts of the business seems to be lagging behind. Some seems to be leading. And I think it's super because it's like that almost everywhere. But let's deep dive into the next question. In the future, all companies will be tech companies. Well, some of you are already tech companies, but you get my point here. We're moving towards the algorithmic business side of things, potentially from a more traditional business models. How is this going to affect us? Alicia, what are your points here?
So let's be very clear. Insurance is a traditional business, and that will remain the case. But there are ways in which machine learning is helping us expand and improve. So we talked a little bit about automation, and that's really important because, as my colleague Elena highlighted in the session just before this, we're spending 90% of project time just doing the data work. And what we really want to be doing is the modeling, because that's where we can develop the solutions that can help build resilience across the world. But we are spending a ton of time on the actual data. And so automating like data sourcing, ingestion, curation, and using technologies to help us do that better and faster and less human intensively really liberates our time to focus on the risk modeling. And it's not just acquiring the data, it's also automating processing or policy management. I mean, all of these things can really be done by a machine, right? Whereas before we had like people poring over documents, hours and hours, trying to find differences between documents and things like that. So now if we move to the risk modeling part, which is the exciting part, we are seeing a number of exciting fields where we can bring new products and benefits to society. So the first thing is things like parametric covers. So basically much simpler insurance structures that just are focused on a parameter that is preset. And if the risk hits a parameter, say hurricane strength X, it pays. And it's an automatic payment straight to the person's bank account. No need to demonstrate losses. So that's really cool. The second thing is accessing new risk pools. And this is exciting because it can expand insurability and protection for more and previously uncovered risks. And this is really important because when you look at the world's, and I don't like this expression of protection gap, But there is a very big difference between the losses that we're experiencing as a planet and the coverage that people can benefit from. And so expanding insurability and protection is really important because nobody can shoulder the increasing amount of risks that the world is experiencing. And so we see this, for example, in using computer vision to acquire risks in a house that typically, or in a building, where typically you would have to send someone to write this policy and to cover this risk, which in some cases would be unaffordable. And so we work with very exciting companies like, I'm going to plug Perceptolab here. This is an amazing company we worked with in Italy, who are developing very exciting property-based computer vision and AI technology that helps us cover risks that were previously just not profitable for companies. So there's great work on accessing new risk pools. And then the third thing is this concept of resilience as a service, which is really thinking about risks in the before, during, and after. So throughout the timeline, not just after the risk has happened, but really trying to help citizens and companies and governments predict as much as they can and mitigate those risks. For the ones that they can't mitigate, manage in real time and optimize resources and minimize downtime and losses. And then for everything else, provide affordable and automated products that can pay fast so that people can come back and bounce back quickly.
Great. I mean, it sounds like traditional, but also algorithmic already. So,
Yeah.
so Robert, I mean, I think your product, it's algorithmic, right? How are companies perceiving that and the kind of persistence with it?
Oh, well, the hardest part is when it's not visceral. The thing is, the thing that I really like about business processes is that anything that you can structure is mathematical. So, you know, a sequence of decisions or anything like that. But it's much more easy to understand an image classifier or a text model or something like that, which is why basically every instance of AI that people think about are like Facebook's Dino that applies to videos, or, you know, GPT-3 for text. But it's not immediately evident how you apply Dino to insurance. So, you know, you have to be a pretty clever person to be sitting there and thinking in abstract terms, you know, what decision process is this? That's a graph. Can we traverse the graph? And also, that's asking a lot of the people. So I would say that I think people are capable of it. Just like, you know, at one point, everybody thought the internet was basically websites. I think people understand really the premise of the internet now, that it's a communication platform, that it's asynchronous, that it has, you know, there are many channels, they compete with each other, all the dynamics of it. People are going to understand AI and be very much at peace with not understanding how it works, but just that it works and what you can do with it. So yeah, there's a lot of resistance now, but people are warming up. I think Corona might have helped, being a little bit more open to letting technology help out with things.
I think I'm almost going to put that on a T-shirt. I think people are warming up.
Yeah.
I think it's a good statement.
I thought the T-shirt was going to read, I think Corona helped.
I think Corona helped, yeah.
It was really good. Quote.
Perfect. And shout out here also from Alberto from Tetra Pak. He totally agrees with you, Robert. A fact-based culture plays a key role in this.
Sure.
Anna, any point of view from your side? ICA going towards an algorithmic business?
But I think that both of you described a lot of what we are experiencing when it comes to processes and operations. Though I do believe that you know, that people won't be happy, you know, expecting a black box making of decision making. I have this well, at least hope, not knowledge, but I do hope that people will be more interested in this field and, you know, get some kind of base mathematics so that they understand what decisions have been made and why also. And then, you know, in some ways, I think that every company already is a tech company. In most other ways, I believe not. And what I mean with that is that, I mean, we have come really far in some areas, but a tech company, I mean, for me, Google is a tech company in a lot of ways, right? And at ICA, we also have some really funky databases and code stacks, just like Google. But what is characteristic is really, the way of tech thinking you want to put it. You have that kind of thinking across the whole company at all levels. And that's something that we don't have yet at ICA. And I think that that's something that, the business side should be more inspired of. And we aren't Google and we shouldn't be Google, we are ICA. We should be a company that listens to our customers and make their everyday easier, because that's our vision. But we can do that by using algorithms. And this is what we want to work against and are working against.
Great. I'm looking forward to it, Anna. A bit here in the chat as well. Alberto has a good comment on, do we need to know how the microwave works to use it? Very good comment. I think that's why we have abstraction layers, right? We want to reduce complexity, being able to use the functions like the microwave and the remote control. So it's a very good pointing that out. We have from Sumil as well. Accessing and managing new risk pools is an important topic for most industries, and it would be wise to cross-leverage experiences from insurance and apply in all other industries.
I really like the microwave comment. I would want to say that you should at least know not to put in your, knife into it, because then it explodes. So, you have to have some kind of base knowledge of how it works.
Yeah, I think that came a comment here as well. If you don't know, there's a good chance of being afraid. There are people afraid of micro ovens, not to mention machine learning. So good point as well, Anna.
It's super interesting talking about the black box from a video game industry perspective. I think looking on the outside in, everyone would assume, you self-classify as a tech industry, and that's like not even questionable. You're a tech company. But within the industry, and it's almost as big a war as kind of tabs versus spaces, I guess. But there's this kind of debate over whether, are we really a tech company or industry, or are we really an entertainment industry? Because our ultimate end goal is to produce a product which entertains the user. And that obviously also requires a lot of skilled professionals, such as artists and voice acting and actual acting, motion capture. So it's kind of, there is also influence from the film industry, which is obviously heavily entertainment based and not tech focused. So, but I think whether you self-identify as a tech or an entertainment company determines how much on board you're going to be with adopting these methods. Because if you kind of self-identify as a tech industry, you're more likely at the end of those free-to-play games that I mentioned earlier, you're relying on the algorithm to tell you how to improve your game so that you can make more money. But if you're considering yourself an entertainment company, then you kind of think, well, we know best. We're the creatives here. We don't want some magic algorithm telling us how to make our game fun. We've been making games for 15, 20 years and they're fun. And I want to tell my story. So there's a lot more resistance there. And it's actually pretty hard in some of those companies to try to get people to be more data literate and actually engage with the data to make better decisions. So it's an interesting considering both sides. And I've seen both sides within the industry. And it's an interesting
I think it's
time.
very easy to come up with many examples of how the internet changed gaming. You can think of Steam, that's internet is central to it. You can think of multiplayer games over the internet, but it's very hard to think of AI-centric games. You can always think of how you can apply AI to games, but like AI Dungeon that has come out now, which is a game where the AI is central and comes up with the story for you. That's super neat. And the question is it easy or hard to come up with ways that, the internet influenced insurance? How can AI be a central facet of insurance in the same way? And the same thing with e-commerce and retail. The internet has transformed it for sure. AI, there has to be ways where AI is central to new kinds of services that we haven't thought of yet. That takes a lot of bravery, I think.
So talking about the new services and that we can enable with AI, let's talk about use cases then. So Alicia, what are some of the key use cases you see in your industry?
Yeah, so if you, for those who attended the session just before, my colleague Elena highlighted 3 key areas where we're using machine learning. First one is around sourcing, ingesting, curating data. And that's really important because, as we just highlighted, this is where we're spending 90% of our time, which is kind of crazy since we're actually a risk company, not a data curating company. So this is an area of real focus and need, I would say. And so increased investment in data engineering is something that we're now pushing very hard for, so that we can really focus on the modeling. So if we move to the modeling part, this concept of hybrid modeling, where we can overlay and integrate models, is really attractive because, of course, one of the big problems we have is shortage of data. And I always laugh because everyone's talking about big data, big data. You know what? Oh, we see a lot of data holes, and maybe it's because we're a Swiss company and all I see is Swiss cheeses everywhere, but we have a lot of data holes. And so I like these hybrid approaches that are less sensitive to not having fully clean, past data sets that can help us still model more accurately and provide things like hyperlocal modeling, which is really interesting, for example, in the context of cities, where you can really look at specific areas or nodes and redirect resources and people and manage the situation much better, rather than, I don't know, for example, the Genoa bridge. I mean, eventually they got their stuff together, but the first kind of 2-3 days were just a meltdown, right? And that's what we want to avoid. And so hybrid modeling helps us do that much better. The third area we looked at was this privacy preserving analytics area. And this is really important because we have all the models, we're great at models, but then how do we get data? And so, of course, this is very sensitive. And clients may not be willing to give us a great granular view on their business, because, of course, they see it as it could play against them on the risk covers. And so being able to offer secure enclaves where we can do analytics, which also helps solve the data scarcity problem. If we can pool data sets together in secure enclaves, we all benefit from better modeling and risk insights. The fourth area I would like to highlight is dynamic risk pricing, and that's really cool for things like you can provide parametric covers. You can provide things like behavioral incentives depending on people's behaviors. And so, for example, I was using this example earlier with Percepto Labs technology for properties. You can introduce risk resilience services where you help people understand what the risks are and mitigate those. And then if they do mitigate them, you can compensate that with, for example, premium reductions. And so this behavioral aspect is really great. Also for health, for example, if you can help people live better lives and incentivize better behaviors that actually reduce their risks, they win, we win, governments win, everybody wins. So I'm pretty excited about that area.
Super. Before we continue, I just want to lift up a few comments from the chat as well. Thank you so much, Sumil and Alberto, for providing, and Rasmus as well. Alberto says cognitive science probably is the answer, or part of it. Sumil responds that what internet is to communication, AI is to cognition. I really like that one. And the key challenge is that we don't use much cognition in our day-to-day decision making because we're more attuned to using rule-based thinking. And then Rasmus adds on that tech is essentially a tool like a hammer, but the building industry don't identify as tool companies, even though they use them every day to realize value. Still, they drive tooling development. So Anna, after those few remarks on the side, some use cases from the ICA side.
Yeah, oh God, I took this literally, the common use cases in retail are recommendation engines and market basket analysis and price optimization. You have location on your stores, that's a classic one. You have fraud detection, personalized marketing, price optimization. I really liked your division into 4 different fields though, but I mean, these are the normal ones. And then there are specific ones that we as a company are looking into, because of course, we also have the data sparse problem. I think that every company has that one, but we still have a lot of data. I mean, it's not only what people are buying for food, in stores, but it's also, the pharmacy. We also have the bank. I mean, if you connect all of it together, you get a quite holistic view of the customers. And don't worry, I'm not allowed to do that. You have to have a special kind of allowance to do so. However, the kind of very interesting areas that we are looking into, apart from the normal ones that are also interesting, of course, are sustainability. I mean, how can we as a company look on the logistic flow, for instance, to optimize the ways that the trucks are driving in order to minimize the petrol consumption? Or healthy living, similar to what you were talking about earlier, but how can we as a company help our customers towards a more healthy living? And how much should we help the customers? I mean, where is this kind of limit where we as a company still have a responsibility, but we don't want to go in too far on the individual person's right? And then, of course, safer society. I mean, part of the ICA family is then housing as well. So we own houses across Sweden, and we are looking into how to make these areas safer for persons living there. What kind of patterns can we see, and how can we act upon these patterns to make sure that people not only feel safer, which of course is a huge deal, but also actually are safer. So yeah, these are very interesting areas, I think.
Super. Time just flies away. We only have 9 minutes left, and I'm being the timekeeper here as well. But I really want to get to John and Robert as well, and then a final round of final conclusions from you. So, John, go ahead. What are your use cases?
No, super quick. I just want to say I really love the idea of gamifying health and the reward being reduced premiums. Like as a gamer, I love that idea. Essentially, paying me is how I see it for eating better, which is kind of a cool idea. But within the gaming industry, I mean, from the top, I started listing ideas here as well. Like, and I thought, but the list just grows and grows and grows. Like there is a near endless list of possibilities that we can achieve with data science and machine learning. And of course, we're using the term AI here across this conference a lot. But when we say that within the gaming industry, we typically mean the algorithms that drive the non-player characters in the game world as well. And that's not something which we touch upon very often. But in most video games, there's hundreds or thousands of agents running around, and they're all driven by, we use the word AI, but it's obviously kind of pre-machine learning AI in their mathematical algorithms that try to generate kind of realistic responses from the NPCs. And I think that's obviously one of the areas where we're also going to see machine learning moving in to improve the game AIs that we see within the game experience. So the different agents that we see within the world can respond more realistically to our actions, and maybe even one day kind of our emotions. Like I picture potentially one day the webcam on top of your screen picking up your emotions as you're playing the game, and then modifying the game that you're playing based on whether you're having fun or not. And maybe a little bit creepy in an ethical sense, but I think it can be kind of
creepy.
Yeah, if it doesn't leave your computer, it's less creepy, right? Even if you're being watched by your game. But I think it can really be broken down into kind of categories, and there's it's going to help us produce better games faster in the long run, and more unique experiences. From a publishing perspective, it obviously helps us kind of with a sales perspective and the marketing, as we've discussed already. It also will help us to validate our products and ensure that we have a high level of quality. I think there's a whole area which we haven't explored very much yet in how we can improve software quality by validating it based on training, so we can make sure that the game that we make not only is bug-free, but also is a fun experience. And also, it's already in use on a lot of user PCs right now. I'm using machine learning models to blur the background on my camera to make it look like I have a more expensive camera than I do, and to perform noise reduction on my microphone. So I think it's really cool to see these going into gamers' hands, and we're seeing them being used every day.
Robert?
I'd like to echo Andrei Karpati's sentiment that we're not going to be writing programs so much in the future as letting data dictate heuristics and stuff like that to So where, you might have had an expert before that sat and said, I know how we should be doing pricing. You're going to let an AI tune that automatically. So I guess the only thing in common with everybody is, although what I would say is that what we have learned is that it's very tough for people to, because it's so tough to conceptualize, it's also tough for them to come up with a strategy for collecting data. And so now machine learning experts, I think, are focusing a lot on reinforcement learning setups that don't require annotated data, that kind of thing. We see in healthcare, collecting data is difficult, not only because it's difficult, but for practical reasons. So I think reinforcement learning in combination with clever new use cases is what I am looking forward to the most in AI.
Great. So we have 5 more minutes. Some final thoughts for the panel. We have to keep it short and snappy, so everybody has the opportunity to talk. Anna, do you want to go first?
No, am I supposed to say something short and snappy?
Short and snappy and very insightful, or give some advice to the listeners.
Maybe that, okay, I'm very pro open source and open data sets, and I'm working towards a world where we as a company can also provide data for research and so on. And I would like to see more money spent on open data sets and sharing information between companies for research purposes. So I hope that this is a world that we can build, to get rid of at least some of the data sparsity problem.
I love it, Anna. Let's make it happen. Alicia?
I want to end with a quote. So you probably know E.O. Wilson, a very renowned biologist. And he once said that we humans have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technologies. So I would like to adapt that and say that enterprises have poorly curated data, fragmented technology architectures, and godlike algorithms. And so this is my call to not just the insurance industry, but really companies throughout the world to focus much more on building, on the one hand, the underlying technology that can help us. And yes, that will cost money. And yes, we need to staff our companies correctly. And yes, we need to comply with regulations. And yes, we need to push for support across the organization with explainable AI, as well as trusted environments. But the benefits are enormous. So huge encouragement for everybody to invest in it.
Super. Godlike algorithms. I'm looking forward to those. General AI around the corner. John, final words.
I just want to say it's a super exciting time in gaming right now, both as a hook if you're considering, applying your data science skills in the gaming world, and it's a really exciting time as we have technologies from machine learning right across the spectrum, from experiments, which one day will hopefully help us to have games essentially build themselves, right down to things that people are using day to day already right now. So I think having that full spectrum means there's a lot of exciting areas that can be explored, and there's going to be some interesting challenges along the way. But I think it's going to be great to see game companies moving slightly more towards the tech end than the entertainment end. So.
Super. Robert, you get to close it off here.
All right. Well, I think the nice thing about this panel was that it's obvious that we're all can-doers and believe in technology, and it is possible to go too far with unbridled optimism. But I would like to encourage everybody listening not to fall for the tropes where people say this has been done before. It's much more complicated than you think. You do need to have a can-do attitude to make progress, and so that's what I thought was good about this call. It was right and moderate and very good.
I agree with you all. I think this was a very nice conversation. Some really good topics that we picked up in here, and I really enjoy it. Hopefully, we have a little bit of more comments here in the chat. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to go through it all, but Nette at least here says that a challenge is also to have AI overperform humans in challenging tasks. Their good data is not enough. It's just a starting point. I think this is a conversation, and us maybe representative the insights and how to do it. We need to be open, and we need to train the people that we are talking to. So thank you all for listening in. I really enjoyed this chat. Connect with our speakers. There are the networking options in the platform, and I'm pretty sure all of them will say yes if you connect on LinkedIn or try to send them an email. Looking forward, and thank you so much. We are closing up on this conference. It's been really nice so far. Don't miss it. Take care and have a great rest of the week.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.